Ahoy, everyone. This is David Eugene Perry in the Zoom room with longtime friend and colleague, and truly, without exaggeration, one of the world's foremost experts in travel and hospitality trends, especially in the large meeting space. Please welcome to the Zoom room, David Kliman. David, how are you?
Ahoy, very nice to be with you, David.
And before we start, a very happy birthday to you today.
Oh, thank you.
So the last time we spoke officially was during those really frightening first months
Dark
of COVID
pandemic days.
when travel just evaporated, meetings
Yeah,
just evaporated, billions of dollars in revenue lost. That was 2 years ago, almost to the day.
almost, yes.
Where are we now, 2 years later, vis-a-vis tourism and travel and the large meeting space?
Well, there's real optimism. There's real need to be realistic, but I can tell you that World Travel and Tourism Council reported recently that travel and tourism in the United States is expected to return to pre-pandemic levels in 2022. And that's really interesting that out of this 2 year period of real constraint and just falling off the ledge in terms of bookings, that we're coming back. And in fact, Adobe Digital Economy Index reported February 22 that airline bookings for US travel beat pre-pandemic levels by almost 6%, $6.6 billion of domestic airline tickets were purchased in February 22. So that's real recovery.
So, talking about recovery is one thing, but also talking about the psychological impact of that and what that means to the recovery. Is this the true definition of pent-up demand, or as someone, I think, worded it in a recent article I read, that this is the summer of revenge travel?
Well, I think it's both. I think pent-up demand, that people have been stuck in lockdown of all different levels. There's a lot of money in the bank that people have saved, and there's this real desire to get out. I think there are some changes. I think you're going to see people really focusing on experiential travel. They want those bucket list experiences, whether it's in their backyard or long haul. And there's real desire to get out and experience what has been so sorely missed during the pandemic.
So, are there any part? I'm talking now specifically about outbound United States tourism for this next question. Are there any parts of the world, or even more specific, certain countries which are the beneficiary of this bounce? And conversely, are there some countries that are not going to see this great bounce back outside of the United States to their borders and airports?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think top of mind is expedition cruising. That this is something, there's new inventory that's been launched during the pandemic. So Antarctica is now more accessible and a little bit less expensive, still very, very high end. But even things like, cruising suffered tremendously during the pandemic.
Yes.
But expedition cruising, I think, is very much top of mind. And so I mean that by specialty ships that have access, and you're certainly the industry expert on cruising, but things like Galapagos, Alaska, Antarctica, the northern route through the Arctic Sea, a very big, it's about a 30-day cruise to do that. But those type of adventures are really selling out and are very much top of mind for people.
Yeah.
Areas that are suffering, look, obviously, we are a month into the Ukraine war, and Russia has been correctly isolated. So any travel in Russia is just basically off the charts. Although interestingly, I was looking at some flight routes where there are still carriers out of the Middle East. The Middle East carriers are offering a lifeline to people that are trying to get into or leave Russia. And that's just an interesting anomaly in the travel industry.
Yeah, I saw that as well. And of course, this summer, my husband and I were planning, before February 24th, that awful day of the beginning of the war, to visit Poland and Warsaw, and maybe even do for me a trip that is something that has always been top of mind for me. I felt the need to visit Auschwitz. Would you, as a traveler this year, would this be a year you would visit Poland?
I think right now, interestingly, the Polish tourism community has risen phenomenally to the aid of the 2 million plus Ukrainian refugees that have flooded into Poland. I think that you would really need to look carefully at what the refugee humanitarian services impact on tourism infrastructure is, because as of the latest I saw was about a week ago, where hotels, venues, arenas, convention centers have been converted into refugee reception areas. And you would really need to look carefully at that. I believe that many hotels in Poland, large and small, are currently housing refugees.
Wow. So, I mean, literally just moments ago, before we started this interview, I watched President Biden speak from Poland. And as someone who is a student of world history, World War II, World War I, even back to that, having seen many videos and heard many audios of presidential speeches, it struck me that we are living in a historic moment. So this is kind of a philosophical question. How does this psychologically and philosophically impact travels and meetings? Yes, it may change in a day. We saw COVID change your industry within minutes. What is, if you could put a finger in the air or, have a crystal ball, how do you see this playing out as far as the real economics of meetings in Europe and travel to Europe from the U.S.?
Yeah, I think that the Ukraine war has amplified the need for flexibility that COVID taught us. Meetings are back. They're not fully recovered. I don't think you're going to see full meeting and event recovery until probably 2024 or 5. However, meetings are back. I'm traveling to Frankfurt for IMEX the end of May, and I am full speed ahead. However, I'm going to monitor and I'm going to be flexible. I really do not expect, and I certainly hope, that Putin's war doesn't impact a meeting taking place in Frankfurt. But we have learned through COVID and through the Ukraine war that we have to expect the unexpected. So stay informed, be aware, read real news. But I believe that you're going to see meetings and conventions in Europe continue to revive and take place, but with full knowledge of world events.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on right now, this moment in the United States. You just got back from South by Southwest, or as it is commonly referred to, South by.
South by, indeed.
Yeah, for people who may not be familiar with that just epic happening, give us a little bit of a history lesson. Where did it come from? What was the impact of COVID on South by? And what was it like being there for you just a few days ago for the first time in 2 years?
Yeah, so South by Southwest has been taking place in Austin for more than 30 years. I believe it's 35, but don't quote me. Started as a small music and film festival that morphed very quickly into a global business, film, music, art, creative, technology festival. I was last there in 2019. Well over 100,000 people in attendance over, I think it's a 12 or 13 day period. And there's sections. There's a film section, a technology, a business, economic, music section of those 12 days. And I was there March 14 to 17 during the business and technology section. They are forecasting, I haven't seen final numbers, but about 50% attendance of what had been pre-pandemic. It was vibrant. It was electric. the airport was full, the city was full, full COVID compliance. You must have had, you must be fully vaccinated in order to pick up a badge. They had a mask mandate indoors that was evolving. It wasn't fully adhered to because the mandate was changing while we were there, but it was very COVID compliant. A lot of things taking place outdoors. So the impact of COVID was that in 2020, South by, which takes place in March, was one of the first meetings that canceled in real time.
Yeah, I remember reading when the NBA canceled and South by canceled. That's when I said, "This is serious."
Yeah, they were literally loading into the convention center and hotels when the governor pulled the plug on events in Texas. So they canceled 2020. They were virtual in 2021, and they were full speed ahead in a COVID compliant, robust fashion. I mean, I heard Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg speak in person. The Secretary of the Interior spoke. Business leaders, Mark Zuckerberg spoke. It was inspirational, and I think a real look to the future. I also saw some breathtaking technology that was quite amazing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that in our last few minutes. Let's first ask, what sort of technology are you seeing? And was it a direct result of COVID, or did COVID just kind of speed it along? And then, because you are the master of stats, I depend upon you to get my best information. What are some of the stats and figures that we're seeing about the recovery and the bounce back out of COVID as we get into 2022?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at domestic airline bookings, $6.6 billion was spent in February just on US domestic air travel. That's 6% more than over the last 3 years. Fares are up about 5%. That lags over inflation, but early data shows that these trends will probably carry on through March of 2020. So in terms of how technology is morphing into today, I think you're going to see a lot more automation in the travel experience. Check in at an airport,
right?
Where there have always been, well, not always, but for the past many years, there have been kiosks to check in, to scan your boarding pass, to print a bag tag. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. Arizona, where I now live, is the first state in the country where you can load your Arizona state driver's license and go through TSA security using Apple Wallet on your iPhone, only iPhone, not Android. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. There were robots delivering room service and housekeeping products at the hotel I stayed at in Austin during South by. And that was not a South by product. That was a hotel product. And it's not the first time I've seen one of these delightful little robots deliver a pot of coffee or some soap or towels or toothpaste. You're going to see a lot more of that.
So let's talk a little bit about one very specific metropolitan area that you know well, and I know because of your work with the San Francisco Travel Association and then other entities in San Francisco, where of course we still have our office, 36 years there. What are you seeing for San Francisco? And I ask specifically because certainly the perception is, and I believe you can confirm if you believe it's real, that San Francisco, of all U.S. major cities, handled COVID, or quote unquote bent the curve better than most. And probably outside of New York City, which of course is much bigger than San Francisco,
a different type of metropolis,
but has the same sort of concentration and density.
Yes.
San Francisco and New York are both kind of struggling still to get past COVID. What are you seeing as far as trends, and what are your kind of predictions when we'll get back to a robust tourist economy in San Francisco?
Yeah, to your point, Mayor Breed and the San Francisco political and business community did a world-class job in anticipating the impact of COVID and taking preemptive action that saved lives. San Francisco is 49 square miles and one of the densest populated cities in the United States, despite the fact that it, unlike New York, doesn't have millions of people living in those 7 by 7 square miles. But the impact on the tourism community, the meetings community in San Francisco has been profound. It is coming back. There have been major events that have taken place in Moscone Center in the last couple of months, and there are more on the horizon. But let's be clear and honest, it is not at pre-pandemic levels. And it will probably not be until 2024 that we are returning in San Francisco to pre-pandemic business travel and meeting and event levels. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's sooner, but that is the reality.
So, David, for my last question, our last few moments, I want you to be philosophical. How has your life, professionally, but also personally, I want to say changed, but evolved because of COVID? And how do you view 2 years after the onset of COVID, what you do for a living and your travel and your work plans? How's it impacted you?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, the negative psychological impacts of the COVID pandemic, the almost million deaths in this country, the tens of millions of people that have been infected, and the impact on personal and professional societal norms, frankly, is overwhelming. And we are all moving through that and at different places in our continuum on that. Honestly, as a person who traveled professionally pre-pandemic almost every week, I used to pride myself on being a professional traveler and being expert at it. I truly feel, I was just chatting with a friend of mine at Netflix online about this, I feel like a travel novice again. And I have to be very careful about the way I pack and the way I travel. And I had an experience at the Tucson airport a month ago where I went through TSA and I got distracted and I dropped my driver's license on the floor and didn't know it. And the person behind me tapped me on the shoulder and handed me my driver's license. I would have never made that mistake before. And that is the psychological distracted impact that we are all in. And I think by understanding it, embracing it, and knowing that we have to be much more self-aware and understand what has happened, and also embrace what we talked about it earlier in this Ahoy conversation, the need to be flexible and to understand what the realities are and not just forge through blithely, but look at all aspects and make intelligent decisions based on the facts and be flexible about our travel plans, about our professional plans. That's the true outcome for me.
Well, and as I know one of your mottos is embrace the possibilities.
Yes, indeed. Think of the possibilities.
We've been speaking with David Kliman. I'm David Eugene Perry, and we look forward to speaking with you again, David, because I'm sure there will be a lot coming our way this year to learn about travel, tourism, and hospitality as we bounce out of COVID. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.